So in this video, we're going to talk about truck valuation. So let me find a nice picture in the background here. Okay, we'll go with that one. Yeah, that's good. Oh, we'll go with that one. All right. So, I was thinking, what is the value of a truck per year? Like, can you say, for example, what is the cost you can assign to a truck per year? So if I purchase a $90,000 used truck, and I hold it for 3 years, then the cost to me, you know, basically would be $30,000 per year. That's something I could look at and say, well, what did it really cost per year? It was about $30,000 per year. Now, you could you could say, okay, well, what if you put, you know, $20,000 down, you know, and then you trade it in, so maybe you put $20,000 down, and then when you trade it in, you get $20,000 back, then you could say, okay, well, then we're going to do 70,000 divided by 3 years instead of 90,000 divided by 3 years. That could lower it to, you know, in the mid 20s per year, whatever 70 divided by 3 is. Not real good with math right now. I just woke up. So, and when I think about looking at trucks, how much are they worth? Obviously a brand new truck is going to be $180,000 to $200,000 for that truck, brand new, and it's going to get fully depreciated over a 5-year time period. So if it was a $180,000 truck divided by 5 years, then you come out with how much depreciation it had per year. It's probably close to like $36,000 per year depreciation. And if your truck payment was $3,000 per month, then that's like $36,000 per year. You know, so trucks depreciate in value around $30,000, $35,000 per year. So if you're looking at a 2022, like I am right now, I'm looking at a 2022 in the year 2025, because I'm going to be looking at buying a used truck. It's got the truck I'm looking at has like 250,000 miles. So, maybe like 2.5 years worth of depreciation. That would be like two times 60 plus another half. So you're looking at $45,000 depreciation at least. And the truck is selling for like 90,000. That's not a bad price. I mean, when you look at it from that standpoint, it's close to 3 years old. It is 3 years old. And if you take $30,000, per year, then it's right in line with that kind of rule of thumb of $30,000 per year. It's like the truck is selling for 90,000. It probably sold brand new for 180,000. But it is like 3 years old. It has less than 300,000 miles, which is good. That's good. I think this is starting to look like a good deal. So it's 3 years old. So if I knocked off, $90,000 from the original price was probably at least 180. 180 minus 90 is 90. It's selling for 90. So I think that's a good ballpark value for that truck. There used to be a Kelley's Blue Book for commercial trucks years ago. Um, every year I would use it for insurance reasons, because I would tell my insurance company how much I want to insure my truck based on the Blue Book value. And he discontinued it for some reason. I guess, sales just wasn't supporting the business. But it was very handy, because you could go in there and you type in the make and model, the year of your truck and the mileage, and it'd tell you what the value of your truck was. Because a lot of time guys think their truck is worth more than it actually is. It's these trucks depreciate very, very quickly. The IRS rules are 5 years to fully depreciate a truck. So that doesn't mean a truck is worthless at 5 years. Obviously, trucks go well beyond 5 years. I recently sold my 2019, and it's a 2019 Freightliner Cascadia. It had 620,000 miles on it, and I had an APU. It had a grill guard, I had a custom leather seat, and a custom mattress. And I sold it for 40,000. I think it was worth more than that, but I really was. I had to sell it, and I needed to just get rid of it. And I was looking forward to buying another truck, so I sold it, and I was like, was that a good price? And I had listed it on truckpaper.com, and they have a free valuation tool. They tell you what your truck is worth, and they said, well, it's worth 40,000. And I'm like, oh, what about all these accessories? They're like, no, it's still only worth 40,000. I'm like, okay. And I sold it for 40,000. But if I look at it, I'd say, well, it still had warranty for another year and a half. So for me, another year and a half in value. And if I use a rule of thumb of $30,000 per year, it was worth at least one full year. That would be 30,000 plus maybe another half year. That would be another 15,000. So that would be like 45,000. And I sold it for 40,000. So I was right there in that ballpark. 40,000, 45,000. I would say, how much life is left in that truck, and it's like, well, you probably should drive for a year and a half till that warranty expires and then get rid of it. So, if you drive for a year and a half, that's the 1.5 times 30,000, it's 45,000. I sold it for 40,000. That's with an APU. That was a real good deal. So when I look at I'm looking at a Peterbilt 579, it has 250,000 miles on it, and warranty would go up to 600,000. So it's basically, we're talking about 3 years, about 3 years value driving that truck under warranty. And then I would let it go when the warranty expired. So I traded it in. So 3 years times 30,000 is 90,000. They're listing it for 90,000. So this stuff isn't necessarily unknowable. I mean, you could figure this out. It's like, how much do you think truck valuation should be on a yearly basis? If it's a brand new truck, it's worth $180,000 at least, depreciated over 5 years. It's fully depreciated. If it's a used truck, you could use a rule of thumb of $30,000 per year since it was new. So it was, say new, it was $180,000 truck, 3 years, 90,000. It's for sale for 90,000. That's within line. And if you really wanted to check, like the quote unquote Kelley Blue Book, I would suggest you call truckpaper.com and ask them. Maybe you have to pay a small fee, for them to tell you what the value is, but you would know for sure what the valuation of that truck is before you bought it. It's you really don't want to get into these sales without having a general idea of what's a fair price. You just can't walk in blindfolded. You're asking for trouble, in my opinion. So I think if you do your research and you compare it to other trucks, and you start looking at these trucks, and you're like, okay, if that warranty is up to 600,000 miles, and I'm going to drive for 2 years, then I shouldn't be paying more than $30,000 per year for that truck, at most. So you think, okay, 60,000, but the truck is being listed at 80,000. Well, that probably is still good, because if you're only going to drive for 2 years, you're going to trade it in. You're probably going to get 20,000 for it when you trade it in. So what was the true cost of ownership per year for you? When you consider the trade-in value when you resell it, and it's probably going to be around $30,000 per year. So when we look at running the numbers and trying to develop your key performance indicators, and you're like, okay, well, I gotta know what my truck payment is. It's like, well, you know, you're probably gonna you probably should use $30,000 per year as a budget, you know, going forward. Now, let's say you buy like this used Peterbilt, this 2022 I'm looking at, 250,000 miles. I only want to drive it for 3 years, but I might finance it for 5 years because it will lower my truck payment. You know, instead of making $3,000 or $2,500 per month truck payment, I can get that truck payment all the way down to $1,000 per month. Sweet, you know. But the thing is, when you lower those truck payments and you go to sell it or you go to trade it in, you could be upside down on the balance due, meaning that you owe more than what the truck is actually worth. So even though you could lower your truck payments by getting something like a 5-year loan, you probably want to pay that truck off, before you trade it in or something like that. And just, it's a $9,000 truck. You're probably gonna, sell it and get 20,000 back and trade in, or if you sell it on your own. So it really is only going to cost you $70,000, and divide that by the 3 years you're going to own it. You can get it down to, between $25,000 per year. It's like, well, that's actually pretty good, because you're doing better than the $30,000 per year average. So you want to think about, are you paying too much for a truck, or is the truck price actually pretty accurate? It's like, you can do some creative things with numbers. It's interesting to learn from other guys what they're doing. I know a guy who bought a brand new truck, and he loves it. But his cost of owning that truck is like $36,000 per year. It's a little high, not impossible, but it's a little high. It's higher than $30,000 per year. And if I bought a used Peterbilt with 3 years old, I can get my cost of ownership down to $25,000 per year. So this is what you got to think about when to decide on trucks and your budget, and what are your goals? Are you trying to save money, or are you trying to get a nice ride by buying a brand new truck? If you buy a brand new truck, your cost of ownership per year is somewhat higher than if you buy a good quality used truck. And when you think about, okay, well, how much are you earning per mile? If both trucks run well, a brand new truck and a good quality used truck, if they both run well, they both get the same fuel mileage, okay, they're both under warranty, your ownership cost per mile is higher with a brand new truck than it is with a good quality used truck. So did you benefit from buying a brand new truck? It's like, well, each their own. It's personal preference. It's not wrong. He prefers a truck, but he's willing to pay higher costs per year to have a brand new truck. And his operating cost for the year for having that truck is slightly higher than if he bought a good quality used truck. And then I think he knows that. It's like some people just prefer to have new equipment. There's nothing wrong. It's ideally everybody would have new equipment, but you got to ask yourself, is the new equipment actually worth it? Do you have other plans for that money? If you don't have other plans for that money, then sure, spend your money. But I think you can get really good deals on a good quality used truck under warranty that would lower your cost of ownership per year. You can get it less than $30,000 per year. The industry standard is like $28,000 per year truck payments. So if you could get it less than that, I think you're winning. You're winning the game. And you look at that truck and you're like, I think that's I think truck prices are high. I've seen them lower. Lower is better, but in reality, it's probably about right. It's probably right right around $30,000 per year. So, but supply and demand affects that too, and the market goes up and down, and it on an average year, you could say, okay, on average, $30,000 per year. But if the demand is high and the supply is low, then we're going to be above average on truck prices. You can't escape it. You can't escape it. It's out of your control. But you can try to wait until things improve. But sometimes waiting isn't the best strategy either. So I would suggest go to truckpaper.com. They got a If you list a truck for sale, like I did, they'll give you a free valuation of your truck. Um, you could compare, all kinds of trucks nationwide on commercial truck app, commercial truck trader app, and you can see what truck prices are. And you say, well, it's within, it's within, the average. It's like maybe slightly average, but if it's got a Cummins engine, you're going to pay a little bit more than if it had a PACCAR engine. If it's got an APU, it might be worth a little bit more than a truck that doesn't have an APU. So you just want close approximation on these numbers. Short of having a Kelley Blue Book, which no longer exists, you wouldn't really know the exact valuation of the truck. The insurance companies know. And I found truckpaper.com to be very accurate, very, very accurate. So you want to arm yourself with knowledge before you go talk to any salespeople. Understand that, generally speaking, the cost of owning good equipment is going to be about $30,000 per year on average. And, you look at how old the truck is, how many miles it has, you start doing the math, and you're like, okay, well, it's 3 years old. It's got 300,000 miles or less. Well, it's probably worth right around 90,000. They got listed for 90,000. So it's not a mystery. This stuff can be figured out. It's not. They're not necessarily making numbers up out of thin air. There is a method to this madness, and they do look at all these numbers. A lot of times truck prices are based on their calculations. So like, okay, what if you bought an older truck and it had a certain number of repairs, and that's how much it would cost you to run an older truck, that's how much it would cost you to have a newer truck. They do so many calculations to determine truck price. They're not far off. They're not far off. And if you're running good miles, you can afford a $90,000 truck. That you can do that. It's not going to cripple you. All right, guys, all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.